Hello and welcome to a new series of Used Car Heaven. Now, since we were last on air some 18 months ago, a lot has happened in the car market and we're going to reflect those changes in the forthcoming programmes. But coming up in this programme in part 2, we drive some classy Range Rovers, so get your four-wheel drive wellies on for that one. But first of all, we take a look at 3 executive cars from BMW, Vauxhall and Volvo. Phil, what do you think it is that attracts people to buying a 5 Series BMW?
It's the prestige of the marque. I think it stands for quality, it stands for residual value, and it stands for status amongst used cars.
So how much has this one particularly fallen in value?
This car has fallen from new just under £10,000.
So it's still a reasonable hit.
As long as you look after them and service them properly and maintain the service history, you'll find that the depreciation will virtually stop on this vehicle for the next couple of years.
And what about problems? I mean, it's been around a while, the 5 Series range now, so presumably they've ironed out any niggly little problems that they may have occurred initially.
Bulletproof, reliable. It's a car that will do mile after mile. Certainly if you look after it and service it properly, it should do 200,000 miles, absolutely no problems.
And is a full main dealer service history vital on a car like this?
It does help it, but it's not vital, I would say. As long as you have it serviced by a specialist who's certainly at least VAT registered, usually dealing in BMWs only, but if it has a full BMW service history, it does help its value.
When you buy a 5 Series, you know you're getting a quality car and typically only depreciates slowly, usually losing about 50% over 3 years with average mileage on the clock. Here's our guide of what to pay. An early N-Reg 520 Auto from a main dealer, around £14,000, with 50,000 miles on the clock. A 523 SE Auto P-Reg, 44,000 miles in a private sale, just under £13,000. These cars, though, are fairly scarce and desirable, so if you see one advertised, you'll have to be quick.
There's no doubting how good the 5 Series really is. Whenever you pick up a car magazine and you see a test between 2 or 3 different cars, if one of those is a 5 Series, you always know that that's going to come out on top. It has a very sporty drive thanks to its superb 50-50 weight distribution, a great chassis and rear-wheel drive as well. Now, it's been around for a few years and there's an all-new 5 Series out probably in about 2 years' time. Through the range, again, a good choice of engines to choose from the base 520 up through the 523 with its 2.5 litre engine, then onto the 528, and then the brilliant V8s, the 535 and the 540, plus 2 diesel engines to choose from as well. We're talking about the 525 and the excellent 530 diesel. Now, I'm no diesel fan, but I have to admit that the 530 diesel really is a superb car. The S80 is quite an unusual executive car, not a great deal about on the roads, but they seem to be selling relatively well, don't they?
Yes, Volvo have always had a following. Usually people who buy Volvo stick with the marque. It stands for safety, it stands for reliability, it stands for good value for money.
And I mean, how does it sort of figure in the marketplace? Is it as good as a 5 Series or better than a Mercedes?
I would say that most of these vehicles are very similar. To drive them you'll find very subtle differences, but it just depends on where you want to place your money. With the Volvo, though, they're very well engineered, ultra reliable. But you'll find that a Volvo driver will buy it to be different from the crowd. He doesn't want a BMW, he doesn't want a Mercedes. He wants a properly built vehicle, which will get him from A to B, but won't make him stand out like a money spender.
Looking at the sort of prices of this car, it was about 23, 24 when it was new, although they've realigned prices now. But at 16.5 for this, it's holding on to its money relatively well, isn't it?
It is actually, compared to the likes of the mass market cars. Again, supply and demand comes into it. There's not that many cars out there, so obviously they're fairly desirable. But Volvos have usually been very good at holding the market value because they don't force the market like the major fleet manufacturers, let's say. There's not that many about there, so they haven't had heavy discounts to push the vehicles into the marketplace. They tend to hold the value very well.
It's hard to believe that Volvo build cars so well these days that are stylish and practical and good to drive when you look back at the rather dull cars that they produced through the 70s and 80s and early 90s. And a lot of that is due to the Brit Peter Horbury, who took charge of Volvo's design team and came up with the likes of the S70 and the C70 and then this S80 as well. And the S80 is the newest of the three executive cars that we're driving in this part of used car heaven, and I think it has a lovely style to it. It's smart, it's stylish, it's chic, and it's very different from the BMW and the Amiga. Now the S80 is the only front-wheel drive car of the three that we've got on test in this part of the programme. Do you notice that? No, to be perfectly honest, you don't. You'd have to push it very, very hard indeed and get it seriously out of shape to put that down to it being front-wheel drive. You can have a lot of fun in it as well. It does handle particularly well, which is quite surprising for this sort of car, but it's probably at its best cruising up and down the motorway, and it's supremely comfortable. I don't think I've ever been in seats as comfortable as you find in the S80.
If you don't want to go with the crowd and fancy being a bit different, the S80 from Volvo could be just what you're looking for. They're rare on our roads and prices hold up well. We've seen examples around now, such as an early R-Edge 140 brake horsepower 2.4 for under £13,000. If you want a quicker S80, well, expect to pay around £20,000 for an R-Edge T6 or £24,000 for a W-Reg 2.9 SE Auto.
Now, I've always thought that the Amiga is a good car which has sort of been a bit underrated by a lot of people. A good quality executive car.
Certainly to drive one is to love one. They're extremely well put together. They have extremely good build quality. I think the problem Vauxhall have got is they're a mass market car. They are vehicles for the masses, and so therefore, because there's a lot of them around, they don't tend to be as desirable as, say, the Volvo or the BMW.
Now that it's lost 50% in 6 months or 12 months of its life, how is it going to start depreciating now in the years to come? It's obviously lost a huge chunk already.
It's lost a huge chunk in the first 12 months of its life, but over the years to come, obviously, it will still continue to lose money, because the older the vehicle gets, the more mileage it does, it attracts a younger audience, and because insurance is a major factor in today's marketplace, it tends to reduce the residual values.
And what about problems? Has the car come across any major problems over its life?
When they first came out, I believe they had electronic problems, but which car hasn't when it first was launched? Usually sorted out very quickly under the manufacturer's warranty. They launched a longer warranty with the Amiga to stabilise the market, to boost confidence in buying one, and they've got their act together over the years. Very, very few problems with them indeed.
There's nothing that Vauxhall or anybody else can do to stop the Amiga losing so much money. The cheapest Amiga, when new, costs £20,000, going up to £32,000 for the top-of-the-range Elite. Look around as we did and you'll see bargains galore. The 2-litre GLS may only have a 4-cylinder engine, but it's well equipped, and an example with as little as 10,000 miles on the clock can cost as little as £10,000 on a W-plate. If that's still too much, go for the early Amigas. They were introduced on an M plate, and £5,000 could get you a 3-litre Elite with 80,000 miles on the clock. How cheap can these cars get?
There's no doubt in my mind that the Vauxhall Amiga is an executive car that can compete with the very best. We're talking about the likes of BMW, Mercedes and Audi, for instance. And it's a car which, if it had a different badge on the front instead of the familiar Vauxhall Griffin, would certainly appeal in terms of snob value to those sort of people who buy executive cars like this. It has a lot going for it. It's a rear-wheel drive car, it's spacious, it's roomy, it's good to drive, it's comfortable along long distances, and you get a great choice of engines to choose from. Now, we reckon that the pick of the Amiga range is probably the 2.5 V6. It gives you plenty of power without being too underpowered, which is what some people would say about the 2-litre engine. and it's not as expensive to run as the 3 litre either. The facelift back in 1999 was very successful for Vauxhall. They spent £100 million on it and tinkered about with over half of the components in the Amiga, and it certainly seemed to work, and it's extended the car's life out for another 2 to 3 years. There is a new Amiga due in about 2002. So it's decision time. Which of these 3 executive cars would I go for? Well, I think if money was no object, I think most of us would probably choose the BMW 5 Series. An example like this costs about £23,000, but you don't have to pay anywhere near as much as that to get a quality 5 Series. Go to a specialist and you could pay as little as £13,000 to £14,000 for a really good, decent mileage example. The Volvo S80 has been an absolute revelation to me. It's good to drive, it's comfortable, it's roomy, it's a real executive quality car. £16,000, £17,000 will buy you a car like this. But if money is an issue and you're on a tight budget but you still want that quality executive feel, then maybe the Vauxhall Amiga is the car for you. An X-Plate example like this with about 13,000 miles on the clock could be yours for as little as £12,000. And you don't have to pay as much as that either. A W-Plate new shape Amiga for as little as £10,000. Well, that's it for this part of Used Car Heaven. Join us again in part 2 when we're going to drive some Range Rovers. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Used Car Heaven. Now, if you fancy a quality 4x4, then there is only one really prestigious marque that you should go for, and that's built in Britain, and it's the Range Rover. Now, no matter what sort of budget you have to spend, we'll show you in this part of the programme how you can get your hands on a really good Range Rover. It might be a classic Range Rover, the original shape introduced way back in 1970, or the latest one introduced in 1994, and a car like this. Nick, why do you think the Range Rover really became popular? I mean, the classic shape's been around since 1970. What really made it take off?
I think the basic thing, it drives so well. It does not drive like an off-road vehicle. When you're driving it on the road, it's as nice and as comfortable as an early saloon car of the same sort of era. As we came later on with them, the prestige side of it came in. They started to dress the interiors up, body enhancements. And once they went over to 4 doors, it made life a lot easier, get the kids in. Started to become a people carrier, an early people carrier. And they've gone on from there, really.
So if you're looking to buy a classic Range Rover, where would you advise potential buyers to go for? What sort of age, what sort of mileage should they have done? What should they be looking for?
If it's a classic Range Rover, there's only one rule of thumb. They sell on condition. It doesn't really make a great deal of difference at the age of the vehicle, or the mileage, or everybody will argue with me, but or the service history. The most important thing with a Range Rover is how it's been looked after, how it's been driven. You can have a car that's on low mileage with full service history that's never seen a main road. They've been on a shoot and knocked about. Just because the service book's filled in doesn't mean to say the car's been looked after. Looking after the car is as important, if not more. This car's done 40,000 miles, it's 18 years old, and it's in as good a condition as a car 2 or 3 year old, only because it's been looked after properly.
And this would sell for about £5,000 or something like that?
If somebody wanted it to take to shows, and it's almost a classic car now, it would probably fetch about £5,000.
And what are the key things that go wrong on Range Rovers? I mean, they have been dogged by problems over the years, haven't they? On a classic one, what do you need to look out for?
It's very difficult. They do tend to suffer from rust and rot on the outer 9 inches of the vehicle, the inner wings, the sills, the rear cross member. But if you knew what that car had been through in its life, it's not that they rust any more than any other vehicle. It's the fact that it's probably been dunked in the sea, stuck in the sea, run on snowy, salty roads, and unfortunately not cleared off. If they're cleaned off after they're used, wax oil maybe once a year, the body will stay superb. But the most important thing to look for with an early classic is the rot situation. If the chassis is badly rotten at the back, if the sills, inner wings, wheel arches and rear crossmember are nearly gone or gone, they've gone past being worth doing up. You need to have a fairly good body shell before it's worth going any further.
It's hard to believe that this shape classic Range Rover was first introduced way back in 1970 and continued life until 1994-1995 when the new shape Range Rover came along. And if you're looking for a bargain 4x4, well, why not look for something like this? An example like this one, which is an H-Reg car. It's done 77,000 miles. It's got a pretty good service history, although you won't find a full main dealer service history on a car of this age. This would cost you at the moment somewhere in the region of about £6,000 to £7,000. It's got that mighty 3.5 V8 under the bonnet, an automatic box, and it's equipped with all the toys as well. Wood trim, leather, air conditioning, electric seats. It has a very old-fashioned interior with this instrument binnacle, which looks as though it's been sort of put on as an afterthought and just sort of stuck there, but that's the Range Rover Classic for you. £6,000 to £7,000, something like this, not a bad bet.
Cars like this never go out of fashion, and they're capable of big mileages as long as they're well looked after. Plus, they're rugged and almost indestructible when you take them off-road. So what do you need to pay to get a good one? Well, main dealers no longer sell the classic Range Rovers, they're just too old for them. So it's either a specialist or a private sale that you need to go to. And you can pick up some crackers. For instance, I've seen a 94 L-Reg Vogue SE with 56,000 miles, complete with all the kit including air suspension, on sale privately at, get this, just £5,700. An H-Reg SE with 100,000 miles on the clock in black with grey leather was on sale for as little as £2,800.
So 1994, Land Rover introduced the new shape Range Rover. I mean, how did it go down at the time? Because it was quite a radical departure from the classic one, wasn't it?
It was a big change. After the other model running for 25 years, people took a while to warm to the shape.
What were the key improvements, do you think, from this over the classic one?
We've always said that the new shape Range Rover is like the classic, with all the bits you liked about the classic, but most of the bits you didn't like. They're completely redesigned. There's virtually nothing that's the same. The handling's better, the road holding's better, the general drivability. They're a different car, totally.
What about depreciation? How does that stack up? I mean, they're quite expensive when they're new, but you can pick them up relatively reasonably now.
Anything between 15,000 and 25,000 with a new shape Range Rover, considering a 4.6 new is about £54,000, they are holding the money quite well, especially with the advent of LPG conversions. That's propping the price up at the moment, and you shouldn't see, with a £20,000 Range Rover, you shouldn't see a great devaluation.
Now, if you're looking to spend sort of £15,000 to £20,000 on a new shape Range Rover, it's probably going to be, you know, the mileage is going to be 60, 70, 80 odd thousand pounds, 80 odd thousand miles rather. Are there any problems at that sort of stage? Are you into any major repair bills?
The mechanics have always been extremely good. The engine, the old V8 is an extremely good engine, very robust. Most of them are automatic with the ZF Auto box, which is extremely good. Electrical problems you have to watch out for. If there are any electrical problems on the car, or most electrical problems will be shown upon the dashboard display. Look for the textbooks or the textbook symbol on your air conditioning, because that can be quite costly if it's showing. Usually means changing the radiators at the front of the car. And also on the early models there were faulty water hoses. So if that engine's been overheated, the worst would be a cracked block, which is very expensive.
The latest Range Rover and the Classic are like chalk and cheese. At launch in 1994, Land Rover had the 4-litre SE and 4.6 HSE as autos, plus a manual-only 2.5 diesel. The cheapest we've seen advertised is a P-Reg 4-litre auto base model in white, not the best colour around to be honest, but it was cheap at £8,000. This had a big mileage and incomplete service history though. A good car should cost you anywhere from £13,000 upwards. At a main dealer, you'll find something like a P-Reg 4.6 HSE with 70,000 miles on the clock for around £19,000.
It seems these days that anybody who wants to be seen drives a Range Rover, whether it be royalty, pop stars, footballers. You always see them in cars like this. And that's because they basically are luxury cars. This is a 4.6 HSE, it's the top of the range model, and it's lavishly equipped, it's comfortable, it's roomy, and it's a car that competes with the likes of the Mercedes S-Class and the BMW 7 Series, to name just a couple of cars. The price of a 4-litre SE at the launch in 1994 was £38,000, and this 4.6 HSE at launch was about £42,000. So you're getting, well, quite a lot of car for your money. This now would cost about £16,000 or £17,000 for this N-Reg example. It's done just short of 60,000 miles, and it is a lot of car for the money. All come with at least power-assisted steering, ABS brakes, a radio system, and an automatic gearbox. You pay extra for the alloys and the leather and an upgraded stereo system. So it's worth going for the SE or the HSE specs, but of course you're going to pay a little bit more money to get those sort of cars. Well, that's just about it for this episode of Used Car Heaven. I hope that we've shown you on this programme some really good ideas of cars that you can buy, and at sensible money as well. And if you fancy something like this Range Rover, remember things like age, condition and mileage, and a good look around the car to make sure it's a good, sound buy. With that, you can't go too much wrong. We'll be back again next week with more great ideas.